for the people that are my audience, it's not new because it's going to be our third conversation.
Yeah, so this is our third conversation in about the space of a month. But the first two were on your channel, and this is now on Freebird Media Canada. So this is the new channel. So for those people, I'm going to be new. So maybe I should say hello, and to introduce myself, I'm Alexander Adams. I'm a British artist, poet, writer. I specialize in writing art reviews, and I discuss arts, identity politics, and censorship. And this was the subject of our first two discussions. We discussed my book, Culture War, which I hadn't remembered had such an appropriate cover image until I was reminded of it this week.
That's totally what I feel. Your book is just so, it's like all the books that I talked last year about and we read, and we had the author, you, James Lindsay, Peter Boghossian, Ellen Pluck Rose, everybody talking about this culture war in politics, in academics, in everybody's mouth, and just came. It feels like I messaged James Lindsay yesterday because I've seen him very active on Twitter since George Floyde and all the races. I mean, I like to say narrative. It feels like a merry-go-round of the why are we still talking about the same thing since 2016?
But the thing is, it's speeding up, and I think that it's becoming more and more important because it seems like we've reached a stage now where 2016, the violence of 2016 in America, people may remember that during the run-up to the election, there was I think it was Charlottesville in 2016, and then there was the destruction of the Confederates, a lot of Confederate war memorials in the USA, and this seems and that was not handled very well, and it was clear that this was going to happen again. And so 2016 just looks like a rehearsal for this wave of hysteria. And so I should tell a little bit about why I am particularly interested in this subject. I would advise people to perhaps have a look at my two articles on Spiked Online. At the moment,
that's what I was doing.
Yeah. So at the moment, I have two articles. There may be a third coming. I don't know. But at the moment, there are two articles.
I will link all of them in the description. But there are two right now, and I particularly I read the other one, the one that's more about arts. I was reading this Spike one that is so into everything we're gonna talk here today. So please just say just
yeah. So I wrote these two articles, and they cover the idea of censorship, identity politics, and it's particularly important to me because I actually live in Bristol, which was the site of where one of the statues that was attacked. It was actually the statue that was destroyed, well, damaged. It was toppled, and it was dragged and pushed into the river, into the dock. And this happened in my home city, so it's particularly of interest to me. And I wrote basically two articles saying, that it was a bad idea, that whatever we think of the slave trade, and I should say at the beginning here that I am not a supporter of slavery or the slave trade in the past, now, or in the future. But I said that whatever our feelings about slavery and the slave trade, it's backward and destructive to suppress the voices of the past, even if we disagree with those voices, because we learn something from hearing people say something, even if it's wrong. We learn from it. So it's our duty to preserve those voices and to listen to them, even if we disagree with them, even if we laugh at them, even if we find them ridiculous. We should keep them. And property is a form of speech. And I see art as a particularly eloquent form of speech because it's very condensed. It's very refined, and it speaks very directly about what was important about a person, because they write on the base of a statue why a person is being honoured. And I think that's particularly important because it gives us an insight into how people viewed slave trading. Maybe the fact that it's not mentioned at all, maybe that is significant, the fact that they completely overlook this element. And that's why it's important to preserve these monuments, because there are not that many monuments. We don't live in a sort of post-Stalin-esque world where we have like thousands and thousands of statues of slave traders or people involved in the slave industry. They're relatively rare, and they get rarer every year. And so it's worth preserving them and keeping them and talking about them. And if you want to contextualize them, then add a plaque that explains what this person did and how they were involved in things that we don't approve of now. And this allows people to think about it and to look at these people, to look at these statues and to read about them. But if you remove the statue, you also remove the discussion. It's impossible to say that slave trading was at the heart of the British economy, or it played an important role in the import-export business in Britain and in British seafaring and in the development of the wealth of Britain. It's impossible to make that argument about how important that was if you have erased all traces, if you've removed every name, if you removed every street sign, if you removed every statue. People can look at it, they read this statement about, oh, it was really important, but all the evidence has been completely removed. And they think, well, why should I trust this? Why should I trust this account that it was important? Because I can't see any of it. The important thing is to keep it so we can talk about it, even if we disagree with it. And that's essentially my argument. That was my argument in the first essay on Spike. The second essay talks more about the dangers of collective guilt and mob action. So
yeah, I love that you point all out. We can just dissect everything now a little bit, because I watched yesterday a video, Sargon talking about that, and I just loved, because I even made notes. Ah, my gosh, I have just so many notes. I even made notes because I think Sargon just gives so much chance for people to cut him out of context. He usually says like, it's not that I'm saying, and then says, and it was just his quote yesterday that I started my series or channel, whatever, would be like a parody of Sargon, is Sargon out of context, because he's saying like, see how Sargon is a racist? Because yesterday he made a video, I don't know if it was yesterday was when I watched, the far right deserves representation was the name of the video. And around 4 minutes and 40 seconds, he says something, yeah, it's not that we're saying, and says exactly what you meant on, it's not that we put the statue of those people there because they were slave traders. That was not the point. So we were not, praising their racism or whatever bad they did. We put them there because they had an important role in our society to build, to construct what we have today somehow. Yeah, built in sometimes in bad things, but remember, and there are so many layers to talk here. First, they were not the whites and the colonization that created slavery to start. Yeah. So they passed by, they picked up slaves that was a market, it was a business that was happening in Africa already, created by their own people. So Africans, black people, were enslaving black people, and they sold these black people to people that were passing by with boats and with a marketable product to trade. Okay, that was what happened. And not that far after, these evil white people that brought the slaves to America free them. We actually free them. Slavery is not okay in America, in Western society. And we are talking now, I thought was interesting, that the Sargon in the case saying like, yeah, we did not put those statues there because they were racist, but in the way that he said, he totally could be cut out of context and people call him racist. And the interesting thing I keep facing with this racist narrative coming from Black Lives Matter and other people that want to say whites create racism or created slavery. That is not true. They actually abolished the slavery. We don't think it's okay. And just this morning, I heard that UN is going to talk about racism in America because I don't record how many countries, African countries, want UN to talk about racism in America, but nobody talks about how many of those countries still have slavery and kind of a Hammurabi Code type of society, and we're not talking about this. So it's just so wrong.
I think one of the problems is that the Black Lives Matter agenda, it sees slavery and racism together. They're not necessarily joined, and it's not necessarily a black-white thing as well. I think the problem is
it is something that they create. I think it's something you talk in the book, and other day I took a picture and made a post or something of I think it's about the fatal attraction, something like that. That is what is like the victim narrative that congregates, that gather a lot of these minority groups to fight this mythological enemy, common enemy, that is the system. The system is racism. There is this systemic racism that we need to fight. As like, where is it? It's more like a boogeyman that for people that don't know history and have not suffered any type of oppression or any, we're talking about. I love that you saw the video. I take responsibility from the celebrities that became
I saw clips of it, yeah.
And now there are a lot of parodies of it. So I loved, and I shared the Andrew Clavin one yesterday because it's just so perfect, criticizing all the sides, and it's just brilliant.
I think it's worth mentioning in Britain, Black Lives Matter doesn't really exist. It's actually a class thing. You find that the people who are going to these protests at the moment, most of them are white, most of them are middle class, most of them are left-wing.
I think it's more what you say in the article, but what is interesting about that is because it's just a pattern, it's a meme. It repeats itself everywhere around the globe after George Floyde and Black Lives Matter and all the raising the racial culture war, the polarization on not necessarily, like you said, racial, but now it's like, if I cannot frame blacks and whites, can I frame people and the system or people and the police?
I would say that it's an expression of anti-patriotic feeling combined with performative anti-racism. So it's this idea that you're not embodying virtues, you're displaying them. You're displaying how opposed you are to racism by attacking a statue, even though that might be not the correct statue, even though that doesn't reduce racism at all. What you're doing is you're just demonstrating something, and this is something that we talked about. Your new viewers might want to go back and look at our previous interview, because there I discussed the idea of Coleman Hughes, where he talks about three things of being of racism, anti-racism, and non-racism. So the vast majority of people are non-racist. They don't see the world in racial terms. They don't have strong feelings or any strong biases in their daily life in the way they conduct themselves with other people. But the two groups who really obsess over racism are racists, actual deep racists, of which there are not as many as people would tell you. And then there are the anti-racists who have to go beyond non-racism to anti-racism. So it's non-racism is passive. It's just not looking at things in that way, not having strong prejudices, not being bigoted in general. Anti-racists have to demonstrate that they are anti-racist. So it's to do with denunciation, it's to do with persecution, it's to do with joining social mobs, it's to do with joining Antifa, it's to do with performing, it's persecuting people, making dramatic, definite acts that can be seen. Whereas being just non-racist is kind of dull, because it's what most people do, and it's just people not being racist and living normal lives. And so I mean, that's an idea I think that came from Coleman Hughes. So I would advise people to check out Coleman Hughes. He's a very intelligent, articulate commentator on race and politics.
I think it's very interesting. I've seen videos recently, other people commenting, finding some amazing, interesting narratives of racist narratives. Because for me, what is the most interesting about let's start with what started everything. That is the murder of George Floyd. That situation, the entire video that we watch, I've watched, and I got really annoyed by the guy yelling bro, bro, bro all the time. And I totally think there was a entire situation that is very high in adrenaline for the police. So it doesn't justify the murder, but explains a little bit their behavior. Their behavior of like not listening to the people, they feel attacked. It's very stressful moment. The same way that the guy being suffocated should be listened for sure. And people were all freaking out seeing that scene. When I watched, I feel bad. I was actually yelling at the cameras like, what are you doing? Why you have the knee on his back when he is already handcuffed? And I totally think what happened there when I watched the video was a terrible police job. The guy murdered another person totally unnecessarily, was a terrible crime and needs to be punished, just to start. So nobody thinks that we justify it for any reason, even if George Floyd was a criminal, it does, or whatever he was doing, it doesn't justify the murder. But in any moment in the whole video, I see racial motivation, in doing it, what he did. And I've gone after data and seen that there were cases just similar as George Floyd, where the victim was white. So doesn't fit the narrative of Black Lives Matter when they say like, oh, if the guy was white, that this would never happen, because there are cases what breaks their first narrative.
Yeah, so these things have happened, and people have gone through and broken down cases of where you've had police killings, and some of them have been self-defense, and some of them are sort of unclear. Some of them seem to be unprovoked. So there's a whole breakdown, and this happens to people of all colours. And the policemen who were doing this, the police officers, are also all colours. So I mean, I would say take each case on a case-by-case basis.
Exactly.
And if you see a pattern that does not apply to other races, then maybe there's something there. But it does also apply to other races, so I'm not quite sure.
Then they try to talk about proportionality on the demographics, but then we also see the same unproportionality in Black criminality. So it's just putting data over data. We can understand how reality works and not necessarily that the system is racist. And the point of all was like, I don't think it's honest to assume that the white cop killed George Floyd just because he was Black. I think the people that use that narrative, they are the racists, because they are only looking at the people's color in that scene. And is what we would say they are picking and choosing cases to fit in their narrative and parade them.
And what I would say is it's people like Jonathan Haidt and Sam Harris have been very good about this, because they say the reason that these narratives have such force is because we're not looking at the statistics, we're not looking at the overall data, which does tend to undermine the BLM narrative. The problem is that now we have this culture of my lived experience. So people just say, well, it just feels like it's happening all the time. And the reason it feels like that is because that's what you see on the news. You don't tend to see the news of white person shot dead, or white person videoed being suffocated by accident by police. That this just doesn't come up in the news so much. It's because the media is looking for cases of incidents involving black people. So therefore, that's what you're going to see on your TV screen. And that's why so many people say, well, I see it on TV all the time. So it must be true. It must be true that black people suffer disproportionately. Whereas I think the problem with talking about statistics is that statistics are very abstract, and it's so easy. You see an image of someone being killed in front of you on video, and that's so much more powerful than any true statistics, because you have an emotional human response to the image, whereas the statistics are, well, they're very abstract.
And these statistics can be manipulated by the people that want to use it. One of the things that is interesting you mentioned is we're talking here is because in how to have impossible conversations, they actually talk about how in the epistemology we understand that the way that we construct our beliefs is more like we start with the belief and we try to find data that back up that belief. And that is what the mainstream media or Black Lives Matter or whatever people that believe in systemic racism want to find, and is what they are doing. They pick and choose those cases. And Eric Garner, George Floyde, how many of them? Like if you go to UK, where, and I mentioned to you like why it's important to talk not specifically about the Black Lives Matter, but this emotional tribal response, because it's all around the world. Here in Canada, we had some Black Lives Matter protests on the weekend down my street, and I was like, but we don't even have police brutality. We don't have a systemic racism. We don't have police brutality. We don't even see those things here. Why are those people doing this?
Because it's
virtue signaling.
It's virtue signaling. It's performative anti-racism. It's not simply, oh, we're going to get involved maybe in more community events, that we're going to join an advisory body for the police. We're going to go to schools and we're going to talk to youngsters about in sort of de-escalating things. And so when you're met by the police, you act in a very passive, dry way. You follow instructions. You don't start to kick off. You don't get mouthy. You don't make gestures for anyone's guns or anything. So actually reducing the incidences of racism or danger would be they would be very unperformative. They wouldn't be very satisfying. It's much more satisfying to go on a demonstration and do the Black Power salute and scream and shout for an hour or two than it is to get involved in a school or a police community meeting or to stand for the council.
Definitely. Yeah, it is easy. And I saw yesterday a video talking about this too, how many people have been exposed just taking shots and leaving in place or protests. And a lot of people are having a huge backlash being exposed like that, because then they're just posers. Yeah. And there is a lot of posers. I think it is important to talk about all of that, because if you actually care, maybe you would be more interesting to go after the data and find out that this narrative is being totally biased. I talked to, now that we're doing more for free word media, and we're talking about more the fake news. Interesting enough, I just received recently people sending me messages of like Trump mocking the death of George Floyde. And I went after the video, and it was a cut from 4 months ago, Trump actually mocking Bloomberg in a debate, saying that he could not answer the question, and he was just mocking and saying like he could not breathe and doing this. So they cut like 4 seconds and made a hashtag Eric Garner, hashtag George Floyde, saying that while we are parading and walking the Black Lives Matter in memory of these people, Trump was mocking him. And I was like, this makes no sense. So I went after the original video and I found and I sent back to the people who sent me, and they were like, they felt ashamed because they were actually being fooled. They actually saw the post on Black Lives Matter and they were enraged. They actually sent the message saying like, I'm really mad at Trump now. And when I sent back, they were, I'm sorry because I'm spreading fake news. And I was like, don't feel sorry, because at least you shared to me and you were not actually saying, you were saying that you were mad. But when you sent to me, I believe you were a little skeptic, and I went after, and now we just need to send back, expose somehow not these people, because these people could be fooled too. So just make the wave back to find out who is the one making those cuts with the bad intention, because everybody should just drop the narrative as soon as they know the truth.
Well, one problem is that you also have people who they see headlines, in their news feed, and they just see the headlines and they don't read the actual story. I mean, the actual story may also be inaccurate, but the headline is kind of really can be really
clickbait,
and you don't even read. Yeah, but the thing is that so often people don't even read any more than the headline. They just read the headline. It's like, oh no. So more of this. Yeah, I think the problem also is that now we have social media amplifying things. So social media, it speeds things up. It spreads things to places where there is no. I think there is a problem with police militarization. There's also a problem with police restraint tactics in America. I think that's a problem that has to be addressed, but I don't think it's necessarily a racial issue. I think it's an issue to do with the attitudes towards the police, and also the prevalence of firearms in America and so forth. So it's a complicated issue, and of course that's not very fun to talk about on social media because it doesn't give you a head. But the problem is now that we have social media, which is driving people to perform their anti-racism, to share a hashtag or whatever, which doesn't actually increase information and knowledge, and it actually permits this what we could call this hysteria that has just completely engulfed many parts of, certainly, I would say many parts of the world, certainly North America, Europe, and I guess maybe also Australia and New Zealand.
I think that what you said is something I mentioned in another interview, another conversation, about how the globalization and the internet, we have such an expressed communication all around the planet that nowadays we just see everything and we highlight the bad things. We don't do news about the good things that are happening, interesting enough, and that's how we end up with so many people today feeling that the world today is worse than 100 years ago, and it's not true. We are all much better, doing much better in all the senses. But what we do have is that we have this express communication that delivers us so easily all the bad things all around the planet. So before we just would not know that there are people being thrown out of the buildings in Middle East, or people having their feet cut off in Africa. But maybe we don't know, or we don't hear that. We hear like very specific selected news that are bad. And we do feel like, oh my gosh, how people are bad, how the planet is worse. It's similar. I like to make an analogy of medicine. When I used to see people saying like, I don't like doctors, or more ignorant people that don't like doctors because they're afraid to go to doctors because doctors are going to make you sick. It's not that doctors are going to find out you're sick and it's a good thing. It's bad. So they keep saying like, our health is so much worse. It's like, no, that's not true. We live much longer. We have longer life expectation. We can survive out of much more disease. Before we would just die. And this is what people would think like, oh yeah, before we were just dying of death. And now we die of so many diseases.
I would say
no, it's because we can diagnose more. We have a better medicine and we have better lives. But then there are people that are pessimistic and they're going to just say like, oh, we just get sick much worse. We have so much worse life.
But there is one area where we're doing worse, and that's economically in the West. So while the global picture is improving, so you've got all these developing world countries improving, their standards of life are improving, their health is improving. That's, generally speaking, obviously there are some countries that have particular difficulties, some countries where there are wars. But there is a problem in the West in that a lot of people have little job security. Globalization has made their futures, their careers quite uncertain. So you have people who have multiple careers now where they do a whole many different things throughout their life, not necessarily because they want to, but because their industry closes down, or the place where they live can no longer provide them with this kind of job, so they have to change their job. So economically, I think that this has increased uncertainty, and I would also say that globalization and mass migration has also made people in the West very more uncertain than they were 20 years ago. So I would say that that's one respect where there is actual evidence where things are not improving for the majority of people in terms of security and stability. And I think that is kind of preying on people, especially the middle class, who kind of assumed that once you got your degree, you would start in a career and you would go all the way up until retirement at the age of 60 or whatever it is. Now, of course, so many more people have degrees that you're not getting these jobs.
But I think that would be maybe a problem that we have in society on where we are putting our investments in the active life, and that would be more cultural, maybe. It definitely is political because there are a lot of political incentives to go to school, to get a graduation, and sometimes we should review the system, the way that we are producing employees in Western. But I still think, like, comparatively, if you zoom out, you're gonna see
overall,
that
yes,
we are doing better, and that we have a difference in between the Western society to the right, but then we save Asia because they are very apart and do well as well. So it's difficult. Maybe that is something we need to do more, maybe even case by case. It's like go to the individualism specific talking.
Yeah.
But I love the conversation. It's just so much to talk about all this identity politics and the racial issue that I think it's so important. And we had Dave Chappelle making some special that came out. I don't know if you saw after George Floyde and Black Lives Matter.
I heard a review of it. It didn't. I think one of the problems is that people in the centre and on the right, they liked the Dave Chappelle show against cancel culture, and they were very enthusiastic, and they think, yeah, that's great. Oh, what a great takedown.
It's still good, and it's still good.
But he was always on the left. He was always on the left. He was always invested in identity politics. He was always looking at things through a racial lens. So he's just reverting to type. So this new special, it's just like, if you knew anything about Dave Chappelle, you knew that was coming. The stuff on cancel culture, that's great. It's perfectly true, but that's not his primary thing. That doesn't mean he's not in the centre. He's not a conservative. He's on the left. Yeah. So I think people were disappointed because they hadn't got a complete picture of what his production was.
Definitely. Yeah, that's true. That is definitely true. But what I like to see when we talk about, and it doesn't need to be necessarily famous people, important people. I think the racial narrative on the systemic racism or racism itself was when you talk about George Floyde case, and even if we assumed, and that I think is wrong, let's say, because I don't like the assuming that the cop was racist and that's why he killed George Floyde. But even if in the future he comes out as being a KKK member, racist, that I killed him because he was black. If he said all that, and we know that he's a racist cop that killed the black guy, I still don't think one individual, this one cop makes the entire system racist. Mainly because he was fired, he was charged, the entire team is being prosecuted. So let's see, justice is
That
being
shows you
made.
that shows you that the system is not racist. That shows you that the system is trying to deal with these incidents, that people get
Exactly.
punished for it,
So
that
it doesn't make
these things are
sense.
not
Yeah.
covered up.
The protests, the riots don't make sense. And talking about the protests versus riots, we are talking about we are fine, we are all lives matter. And one interesting thing that on the racist, anti-racist narrative is that people like to say, if you say all lives matter, you're racist. And it's like, that's not true, because if you're actually racist, you never would say all lives matter, because you don't believe all lives matter. You actually think there are lives that matter more. So uh, I don't I don't see how their exercise, their thoughts make sense, because don't because they don't. That's my point.
And you can tell that it's more of a slogan than an actual belief system, BLM, because when it comes to what are they doing every day about the killings, the gang killings in major American cities, Detroit and Chicago, and so there's black men and black people in general are much more in danger from other black men than they are from the police. And this is because of the gun culture, because of gangs, because of problems in the inner cities and so forth. And it's a terrible problem, and BLM don't seem to be talking very much about this. And they also don't talk about who was the retired black cop who was defending the shop and he was shot to death.
Mm-hmm.
And that was I've forgotten his name. I did know his name, but the BLM doesn't talk about him, even though he was black, even though he was defending a local shop against looters, because he was an ex-cop. His life doesn't matter as much as Keith.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And that is terrible. That's terrible, because it's just more like what we see demonstrations are all white lives matter being cut down. So do white lives do not matter? And it's interesting. I think it is the most dangerous thing on the black, white, or racial, to raise this racial war, is because we should not even be segregated by that. The same thing I always talk on the channel was like, I think we should not be building more walls. Like, all the things that polarize us should be opinions, and should not be that powerful. If it's something that is is your identity, and you cannot even change, is something that should not be judged, and we should not be put so much importance on that. So it's the same thing when you talk about gender identity. It's like, I don't care what you do in your private life, which sexuality you have. So stop bringing this up in the politics. The same thing with the racial.
What increases segregation is mass protests and race riots, because you have white flight. People, right now, San Francisco is kind of emptying out, as so many middle class people are trying to sell their houses for anything they can get so they can get out. And you're going to get not only, of course, white flight, but you're going to get middle class black flight as well.
The damage of all
Asian
this emotional
shopkeepers.
response is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Not even to talk about, we are all really worried and sorry about any police brutality that caused any death, not only of black lives, but we have to analyze the data and see that maybe that is not a problem that should cause so much more problem. And just because it's emotional response, and just because it's a completely tribal response, that one innocent life was taken, George Floyd died, and we are all sorry for the crime that happened. And it should never happen anything like that to anyone, independent of its color, of this person's color. But now we take one innocent life taken, enrage so many people, cause so much destruction, loot, riots, and damage. Not to talk about the lives. How many lives have been computed over his life after that because of the riots? So it's so hypocritical. It's just so dissonant. You know, it's such a.
Did you see Benjamin Boyce, who's sort of a friend, a contact of us both?
Mhm.
Benjamin
Yeah.
Boyce did this new video about the three options. He was talking about basically it was someone who was in the theatre world in America, and they were compiling a list of people who hadn't properly, of venues, who hadn't properly committed support to Black Lives Matter and not donated to them. And that you have three options. You can either refuse to donate, or keep silent. And he was saying that basically this list is kind of like it's a protection list. It's basically you support Black Lives Matter or there will be consequences for you. You will be blacklisted, you will be protested, there will be consequences.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
And the thing is that it was printed in a newspaper as if this was a good thing, as if they approved of this. And the person spoke openly about saying, oh yeah, we're keeping a list of people who are donating and not donating. And they were saying this openly, that it was okay. So it's basically, they're saying that a major part of what's happening now is an extortion. It's a credit racket. It's like the mafia or a gang saying, you know, if you want to keep trading, you need to give us money. And that seems to be what's happening with BLM.
It's terrible. It's terrible. And actually, I think I'm just thinking back on the video that I shared yesterday, because in the Andrew Clave, and one of the parts of I take responsibility, actually it says like, please don't kill me. I take responsibility, so please don't kill me. and, and I was like, okay, that was very edgy, because it's almost like saying like, okay, Black people are violent, so please don't kill me. I will say I'm sorry for your. It's and that is like, it's the edgy thing of a comedy that I enjoy so much to be able, but it's sad when the comedy is actually speaking so much truth, because people are just so dissonant nowadays that they would threaten people with violence if they don't support something. The other thing I think is sad, but I have friends that have shared not specifically their opinions on Black Lives Matter, but they keep sharing articles that say like, if you do this, you're gonna be sending money to Black Lives Matter into groups, and has a very low likes, I would say. And what makes me happy, because I personally don't support Black Lives Matter. I speak very against their mythical narratives. I think all lives matter, and anything that use racial narrative to prop up, it's silly and sad, and is using badly intentionally, you know.
Yeah. The direct upshot of these protests and the riots is that Black Lives Matter has received tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars, either going directly to them or to their community projects that they support. So these are basically associated organizations that have links or are controlled by BLM or our allies of BLM. So this is a huge business for them. It's really shocking.
I don't know. It's troubling. It's worrying, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, a
And
little bit on what you see Project Veritas exposing on Antifa, those movements that end up creating little militias and violent little groups. It's dangerous. It's worrying, mainly when you're talking about places that have no police anymore, that they are trying to ban police. And I don't know. It's
we should say at the time of recording, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone in Seattle still exists. By the time you see this, it may not exist anymore. But yeah, we'll see what happens. And I think one of the reasons that we had our violent protest in Bristol is because Bristol is a very, very left-wing city, and has a lot of university students. And what happened was, the reason it could get to the state it did, and the reason things got out of control in London as well, is because the police chiefs, the councillors, and the local politicians support the mobs. They are also left-wing. They want to show that they are anti-racist, so they hate anything that's branded as racist, even though it may not be racist. And so they approve of this idea that almost anything connected with British history is covered in blood. It's the upshot of evil, and that it needs to be punished or erased or humiliated. So one of the reasons the protests in Britain have gone quite badly is because the police chiefs are told by the politicians, leave the protesters to do what they want. We don't want to injure any protesters. And much of the senior police force is also trained it's more trained in anti-racism than it is in fighting violent crime. So they automatically have an automatic support for anyone who claims to be left-wing, anyone who claims to be anti-racist, anyone who claims to be Antifa, even though they're not, even though they are acting in a way that's, quite right-wing. The police and the politicians tend to they tend to go quite soft on this, and of course, once you make one concession and you allow one thing to get out of control, it will just carry on, and it will escalate. What I would also say is, when people say, "Oh, why are you so upset about one slave trader statue? So what? Boo-hoo." Well, it's not going to stop there. It's going to go on to the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. And we've seen movies banned, we've seen comedy series banned, we've seen comedians banned, we've seen threats to gravestones of actors and comedians who once wore blackface. So people are threatening to destroy their graves over something that happened 50 years ago. And this will carry on expanding, because if you have a system of denunciation and of accusation, then it must spread. It can't be contained. It has to expand, because everyone has to name a racist, has to name a sexist, has to name a slavery supporter. So it has to expand. So it will carry on expanding, and it will take out not only the statue of one slave owner, it will take out the statues of people involved in the colony. It will anyone involved in the military, anyone who was involved in colonizing other countries, anyone who's involved in capitalism, anyone who was involved in anyone who went shooting lions in South Africa.
Puritanism.
Everyone. It will expand to everyone. So when people say, "Why are you worried about one thing?" I'm saying, no. Once you establish the principle that we have a denunciation culture and that mob violence is okay, this will expand to include your favorite films, your favorite books, your favorite comedians, everything, and then it will include you.
Yeah, it's the witch hunt, is the Puritanism of nowadays that you're going through, and it's scary. It's scary to go through it again.
I promised your viewers an exclusive. So I have exclusive news which I got yesterday, and that is that I have been commissioned to write a new book. So I've been commissioned to write a follow-up to Culture War, and it's going to be about iconoclasm and identity politics. So that will be out in the autumn or early winter. So I encourage everyone who hasn't already read this book to keep an eye open for this new book, because it will be covering issues like this. I'm really frustrated because now I can't use this cover for the next book, because this is the perfect cover for the next book. So I have to, and I drew this cover.
Maybe now you can you draw something? Maybe the next step that we're going through right now. Maybe rolling the statue down the river. into it.
Yeah, I mean, I have to
Make
find
something more
I have to
even
find another
picture of the
image.
reality of we're going through.
Oh, I should point out, because the viewers to Freebird Media won't know that I made the postcards that are behind you.
That's right. Yeah, we did not introduce, guys. Go check my interview, the other two conversations I had with Alex in my channel. There are his illustrations in the book as well, and I have other one. This one is one that I've showed in one of our conversations. So he has some and more. And the last one you sent me, I put up there. It's the last one you sent me. Really nice after our conversation. One more thing that I just wanted to talk about, all this racial conversation we are going today, and it's interesting because in the end of our second conversation in my channel, I mentioned that I wanted to approach racism, systemic racism, that would be a whole conversation, and we could not just start at that point. We were talking for like an hour already. But I think today I saw a video of a guy that made a book called Anti-Racism, I think, and talks about how it's important to fight racism, to point out racism all the time. And when I see this type of conversation with this type of narrative, people that believe this, what I'm afraid of happening is to be putting lens on people's eyes that they will believe is what they expect to find. You know, is the scientist, and is what we talk on grievance studies, when you start from the conclusion instead of studying the situation, like we mentioned. So I was just I played the scenario of, like, imagine kids playing together, and kids are really tough and rough to each other, and sometimes they are mean and they say things, but and most of the time they are just being kids. You know, they say no to each other because they don't want to share, they don't want to play sometimes together, and sometimes doesn't have anything to do with color. You know, most of the times don't have anything to do with color. I actually have read reports after that, and I can say a little bit after. But in my uh, comment and my fears, because I see my daughter that is a mixed race. She plays with other kids and she says no to kids all the time. She sometimes doesn't want to play. Sometimes she's rough with them. And my fear now is because there are a lot of black kids around being taught that people are bad to them because they're black. So for those kids, anything that happens that is bad in their lives, it's because they're black. And I think this filter, this lens is damaging to the person that is taught those things.
So what happens is that you end up with this vicious cycle, so that you're looking for racism, you see something that can be interpreted as racism, so this increases your resentment, and you become aggressive and negative, and you don't trust people, and of course this comes out in your behavior, and then people really do respond negatively to you, and that just it becomes a cycle
and
where
then you have racist
confirmation bias
that actually have this intern racism that I've heard before, but I think the intern racism would be the proper term used to people that were taught that they are going to be treated with racism in their lives. So whatever happened to their lives that is bad or unexpected, or, you know, they are mistreated for any other reason, sometimes they are being asses. And that's why they are being mistreated, and not because they are black or because they are woman or because they are gay. But all this narrative on you're being mistreated because you're a woman, because you're black, because you're gay, those narratives are damaging to these people, because life is tough, life is hard. I've been mistreated. I could say, oh, because I'm a mixed race, oh, because I'm a woman, because I'm a vagina. That doesn't work. That is just creates victims, like professional victims. Because if someone walks out through the life and say nothing bad's gonna happen to me, and whenever it happens, I'm gonna claim, use my black card, my woman card.
Yeah, but what happens is it also makes you lazy, because any problem that I encounter, that was external. That was outside. That wasn't me. I don't need to change. You need to change. You need to accept me. You need to accept my diversity. You need to accept my lived experience. Da 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 da. And you don't look to improve yourself. You don't look to improve your lack of knowledge. You don't need to expand yourself because. And you get into this mindset where everything you've done, everything you've achieved, is because that came from you. Everything that you failed at, that was because someone else did it to you. And I know, Jordan Peterson speaks a lot about this, but I mean,
I love that you talked about the mindset, because I talked recently with Cernovich, and he has the book The Gorilla Mindset that talks a lot about your mindset, what you were taught, how that is important on you growing and you're changing your life, and even about even deeper on more the capacity of yourself to change your life when you're taught that you're made like this and you're supposed to behave or do like this, how that is impacting people's life so deeply. And you actually have a power to change, because we are all individuals. You don't need to fall into these stereotypes. We actually should be working to not fall into stereotypes and to do better by ourselves, or to do the best of us. That's something I recently have talked to some people saying that I lost a lot of time in my life because I lived more driven by emotions than by reason for a very long time. Even if I was trying to reach that point, it's difficult to put it all together and work that in life for you to be the best of yourself. But that, I think, is the meaning of life and the purpose that a lot of people have not encountered yet, because lacks philosophy and.
Well, I would say this also applies to feminism as well, because you get a lot of this coming from, I'm failing, I'm not doing so well in my life because people are treating me like a woman, they're treating me badly. If I was a man, I'd be doing so much better. It's not necessarily true. And then a lot of people, they do come to a realization that no, actually, I need to improve. I need to work on some things myself. It's not all external. I'm not, my failings are not necessarily external. Some of them are internal. And with women, they have this time pressure, because if they want to have children, then it's better to get it done, between, 18 and 35 or something, or preferably slightly.
Yeah, it's 25 to 35 is the ideal age for procreation.
but the problem is that if you're a feminist and you've been taught, well, no, you're just being conditioned to be a brood mare, you're just being conditioned to pass on the surname of the father, you're just being used by society to do domestic work, to raise children and so forth, and you buy into that, and you only come to that realization when you're having trouble getting dates, and you're 35 and you're looking at your watch because your biological clock is ticking. It's really tough for women who have fallen into the trap of latching onto feminism in their teens or early 20s, and then suddenly coming to the realization, oh my God, I'm really up against it now.
Yeah, that is a whole other conversation I have entered with more like in chat messages, but it just goes on because there is a large quantity of people that do push that narrative of like the importance of having a family and having kids. And of course, I think it's very important on the feminism agenda, the autonomy, the woman, but there are clashing communities into this thing on the biological call that we're gonna all have, that is somehow natural. And I understand that we not all need to go through this. Nowadays we're talking about a very modern society that you don't actually need to fit the role, the gender role, as a lot of people oppose to. And I think it's fine, it's healthy. It's not that everybody, it's not that all women need to get married and all women need to have kids. Probably most should not, probably not going to even be good moms, and you don't actually need to procreate so much nowadays. But I think it is an interesting conversation, because I had this discussion, and I don't know if it kind of stops me from talking to him. We talked about him last time, and I'm always talking about him, Sargon, because he is the type of politician and influencer that I like. I love his political commentaries and views. But I'm kind of a little cringy on the cultural, family, and conservative agenda of, anti-feminism. Because I am an anti-feminist of third generation. I am a feminist of the old ages. But I do not think we need feminists to get equality anymore. I think we pretty much reached that point, legally speaking. Nationwide, Western speaking, I think women have the same rights, and the third wave feminists just manipulate data. For example, the wage gap is just people that do not understand the statistics, how statistics are made, and don't understand how that is not representative of the absolute numbers. So you need to be able to make that exchange. I usually talk about, for example, there is no job in Western society that actually pays you different if you're doctor, woman, or man, or any profession pays you different because of your sex.
Yeah.
And there are sexist things on more towards men, let's say. If you talk about equality, I would say now we need to force women to go to military army job too, because it's treating people equally and not sexist. So it's a whole other conversation, but I think it's all brings, again, the feeling of being a victim of a bigger system that was made by people to oppress and not really understand reality, how it works. So I think the most important thing is how to be able to disagree, to agree to disagree, because it's the only way we can actually find a common ground and evolve and together walk forward.
That disagreement does not involve destroying things that you don't like.
Protests,
so there we are. We're back
protests,
to destroying
protests
the
do not involve destroying other people's property or public property or harming other people. So, or either to actually say something, because a lot of people think, oh, the police is being violent when they are pulling people out of the streets or out of the sidewalks. It's like, it depends, because if you actually stopping other citizens from moving, that is not your free speech to stand on the road and stop people from going to work.
To stop ambulances and fire trucks. You don't
so
have
that is not your free speech. So that, and every time we talk about free speech is difficult. Free speech is everything you can say that is not calling for action or violence and stopping other people's rights. So yeah.
And I think maybe a good point to finish on would be to say that also to remember that silence is not violence. You have a right to remain silent. You have a right to say, I don't want to take a public position on this. This is not my subject. I'm not qualified. I'm not interested. I would rather keep my thoughts to myself. You have that right, and that should be protected. The problem with the silence is violence thing is it's basically compelled speech. It's saying, you have to pledge your allegiance to the party or we'll be taking down your name. And we need to push against that.
Because we are passing through this pressure of like, you have to say, but you have to also give the right answer. And they have to understand that so many people are choosing to not say things because they're going to be demonized by what they say. Why the polls in the United States come wrong every previous election and they cannot find out that Trump is going to be elected again? Because it's bad to say that support Trump. And that's what gives like a delusional reality.
Making a statement on these issues, unless you've thought about it a lot and you really want to make it public, is ridiculous, because it all depends on whether you say it soon enough, whether you say it in the right tone, whether you say too much, you'll get caught out, and next year the party line will be different. So you'll have to update it. And these are just rules that are there to trip you up. They're there to catch you. They're not designed for you to show your support or for you to take part in a discussion, in a national discussion. It's a way of tripping you up. It's a way of catching you. It's a way of punishing you. It's part of the denunciation society. So you say, you back this cause. If you don't back this cause, we'll take your name down. And of course, if you don't do it fast enough, you don't do it quick enough, you don't say the right words, if you don't also change your social media picture or whatever at exactly the right time, then you're guilty. Whatever you do, you're going to be guilty eventually. And the whole denunciation society functions on catching you out. So
I think
would say,
it's scary that nowadays you have to give your profile online page when you get apply for a job. They suggest you to here your link, your website, and I was like, better not. Because
I can't even go to Facebook and look at my friends' profiles anymore, because I don't want to know who's signed up to Black Lives Matter, because they're going to get caught out. You think this is going to protect you? It's not going to protect you. People are going to come after you. You'll have laughed at a joke 10 years ago, and that joke is now forbidden. You'll have signed a petition 20 years ago, and that's now forbidden. You'll have gone to a concert of this comedian, and that will be forbidden. You don't bother signing up to these sort of hashtags and so on. They're just used to catch you. You will always fail.
Yeah, it's terrible. I think it's interesting that I saw Saul or Elder, I don't record, shared that standing against racism in the past was an act of bravery, but today it's more we understand, when I see anybody enraged or standing with those narratives, I have a few hypotheses. I will think, is this I understand the person is emotional, I understand the person cares, and the same way I care, but now I think, is this person being fooled by the Black Lives Matter narrative? Is this person really just someone that is racist to just, like you said, read just the title or see the picture and assume all the things? Or they are actually the ones that are perpetrating that are doing both? They are spreading just for personal gain, for feel better and to portray to other people that they feel better. So in any of the hypotheses, I feel bad about that. It doesn't feel like those people have good reasons to be standing for that. It's exposed to me some type of weakness. Is intellectual weakness and emotional,
So I think we should just wish our viewers a safe time on the internet with their social media sharks swimming around them. But anyway, so it's been fantastic to speak to you again, Fanny.
I love talking to you, Alex.
I hope next time we speak, and things will be better rather than worse.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. Let's talk after Corona and all this harsh moment we're going through right now. Lots of things. I think we're going up and down, so it should be in the end of the bad moments, because I heard about even new dispute on lands and fights in between countries. So it's I hope things go better and solve. Apparently Argentina is trying to take the little islands back from Britain. I don't know if you guys heard of it. And there is some dispute in between China and India on some areas too. Territories. So great. Corona came to unite us, to segregate us, to cause some wars, some civil wars, and hope we survive 2020.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thanks a lot.
And thank you very much, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Alex, for coming again. Love talking to you. Guys, go check Culture War. Go check all the links here down in the description. His website, all the critics and the new articles. I will put them first in the description. Really, really good. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for watching, everybody, and see you all next video.